All right, welcome DC fans to episode 190 of DC Comics News Podcast, getting closer and closer to episode 200. With me today is our Geekpedia, the one, the only, Steve J. Ray.
I'm Hatman.
And I'm your host, Brad Flicky. And we'll be talking about everything DC, movie, TV, comics, and maybe a few other stories that come our way. So we can jump right into the movie news. And we got not so much updates as affirmations that the Batman Part 2 is still happening, both from Jeffrey Wright and from James Gunn. So, Steve, what did you think of these?
Obviously, we knew it was still happening. The Batman, along with Joker, was one of the two DC success stories of the last few years, and we'll talk about that a little later on in other movie news. So Warner Brothers would be shooting themselves in the foot if they didn't make the sequel. But also, it does concern me that one of the main actors in the movie still hasn't seen a script for a film we're supposed to be getting on screen next year. That does concern me. And of course, as you mentioned, James Gunn has debunked rumours with every fan who says, oh, Batman 2's been cancelled, this, that and the other, saying, no, it has not been cancelled. This film is happening. Too much rides on it, the Penguin TV show, everything else. Matt Reeves' vision is something we want to preserve and we want out there. So I'm really glad James Gunn did that. But the fact that Jeffrey Wright, Commissioner Gordon himself, unless he's joking, unless he's been sworn to secrecy, the fact that he's saying he hasn't seen a script does concern me quite greatly. But hey, maybe Matt Reeves is one of these guys who can turn a multi-million-dollar movie around in the space of a few months. I mean, even with COVID and everything, the first Batman movie was only delayed twice. So who knows? Maybe all the lines are ready. Everything's ready to roll. We just need to finalize locations to get the cameras rolling, get the scripts out to the actors. But yeah, it's a head scratcher, this one. What did you make of it?
Yeah, I think that there's no way that they're not going to do Batman Part 2. There is just too much writing on it. And we talked about this a little bit last week, or last episode, that there's, no matter what happens, DC will always have Batman. And that's like printing money. So they're not going to not have that. And quite frankly, the Batman movies have been more between, even though they're not connected, but the Joker and Batman movies have been more critically acclaimed and more commercially successful than the other DC movies. So of course they're not going to cancel Batman 2. And as far as Jeffrey Wright not having the script, I wonder if he's kind of playing fast and loose. Like maybe he hasn't seen a full script, but he knows kind of what's going on. Maybe Matt Reeves is just being, careful, holding things close to his chest so that, things don't leak. And I think also the faster they get this film out, the better, because we're kind of going to be in a dry year this year as far as hero movies goes. Not that it's obviously not going to come out this year, but still they can start getting the excitement for it ready now by footage, and it'd be. I mean, I guess at this point we're not going to have footage by San Diego, but it would be nice to have a big Batman Part 2 panel at Comic-Con. Although we got the first trailer, that was kind of a surprise, and they had a lot of content in that trailer, and the movie wasn't close to being done at that point. So who knows? We'll see. But I think that there's absolutely just zero chances that this movie's not happening. They would be absolutely silly. And that's one of the reasons why James Gunn has been so slow on getting Batman into his new world, because of Matt Reeves' Batman and the success it had. So yeah, there's just absolutely no way that this is not happening. And up next, we also got a couple of behind-the-scenes shots from Superman Legacy surprise, surprise, which is really good to see. Like I said a few times here, that it's nice just to see that things have gotten back on track so quickly with this after the strike, and it seems like it's really going, really going fast. So that's really good to see. What do you think of it?
It's good to see that things are happening, that we are going to get this film. But the behind the scenes photo, obviously, with the actress who's going to be playing the main villain of the piece. And I'm just a little concerned. This is a character who's been around close to 20 years. I mean, she's well established. But as part of the Authority, they're not really villains. They're more anti-heroes. They're more like, I don't know, your Punisher style, vigilante style, crime fighters who take out the criminals. So it's an interesting take, but obviously it makes sense because we know that Gunn is also going to be using the Authority as part of his ongoing plan. They're going to get their own time in the spotlight too. So perhaps this is the lead way into the Authority. But it's intriguing. I just love the fact that it's not your bog standard Lex Luthor again. So having a fresh character, a new character, an intriguing character who's, best way to describe her, possibly most like the Terminator we saw in Terminator 3. Complete molecular control, machine parts. She can build weapons like a cyborg, female cyborg, but all machine, no human. So yeah, fascinating. And if they can, I don't know, make her possibly absorb Kryptonian technology to make her more of a threat for Superman, I mean, the story possibilities are endless. It's just an intriguing concept. So yeah, to see there behind the scenes, they're getting things done. Cameras look like they might start rolling. Very exciting indeed. What did you make of it?
Yeah, I just love seeing the fact that things are moving. I love seeing Rachel Brosnahan on set. Merced, I'm blanking on her first name. Her on set, and of course, Clark Kent, Superman. Yeah, that's one thing I like about James Gunn, is you're talking about how intriguing it is. Well, he keeps us guessing right to the very end. So going back to the Suicide Squad, he introduced all these characters, and we were thinking, how is he going to integrate all of these characters into this movie? We didn't know, and I like how he keeps us guessing. I have a kind of at this point, I'm thinking that the Authority may start out as villains and have a redemption story somehow in
I like that
film, kind of like building it up to that. So that's kind of my feeling at this point, but it's very early, so we'll see. But that is kind of my impression of it, and I am just I can't wait to see what he does. Like I've said too, I had a little bit of reservations just because it doesn't seem to be deviating from the James Gunn style of bringing in characters not well known and doing it. I was wondering if he would do kind of a change in tone kind of thing from what he's done before. And so far, I don't see that. So that is just a little bit concerning for me in the Superman movie. But in the end, I do trust him. And our last bit of movie news is we got a little more of a discussion on just why the Elseworlds movies are so important. And this is also something that we touched on last episode. What was your take on this?
I mean, we've already said the Batman was phenomenal. We cannot stop talking about Joker. And the fact that both films, which feel almost more like independent movies than your typical comic book fare, are the ones that are doing well, because I think a lot of fans have realized now that if you want popcorn bubblegum entertainment, go see a Marvel movie. But if you want something richer, deeper, textured, more layered, then films like The Batman and Joker are what you want to see, because the amount of psychology there matches the levels of action and spectacle. So the fact that, as you said earlier, when we were talking about the possibility of the second Batman movie being cancelled, that they're the ones that have done well, both financially and critically, out of all the DC releases. And you and I have said frequently that we enjoyed Shazam! Fury of the Gods. We enjoyed Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom. We enjoyed Blue Beetle and all the other films that come since. But I think that maybe the DCU is ready for James Gunn's fresh reboot if he does it correctly. But we need these Elseworlds movies to still keep our pulses pounding and have something a bit more gritty and meaty to watch, rather than just guys in tights beating the hell out of each other. As the amazing artist Gary Frank says on his Twitter, that's his job, is to make people in spandex fight each other. So as long as we're still getting them, and we know, well, Joker 2's almost finished by all intents and purposes. We're definitely getting Batman 2, which I'm extremely happy about. I'm just happy that fans are still paying to see these films. What about yourself?
Yeah, I think that one of the things that this is true that this article focused on was that they're grounded. Joker and the Batman were more grounded. Because if it's one thing that the DC EU, or whatever you want to call it, those movies were all about spectacle and how far they could take the effects. And I think that leads to a little bit of this superhero fatigue that we're seeing now. Batman is something completely different. Like you said, it can get meatier and grittier when you aren't confined by a broader continuity. And it makes sense because DC is not afraid to do this with their characters in the comics. So why should they be afraid to do it in the movies? I think they're just not sure that the audience can handle it. But now the idea of a multiverse is common knowledge. And that would have been a few years ago. That would have been something that your average moviegoer would have been, what? What's that? I don't understand it. Now it's a household term and concept. So they would be completely silly to not. It wouldn't make any sense. And Warner Brothers has been known to make some not so smart choices, but I think the Elseworlds is just too. It's too valuable, especially with, like I was saying, a character so popular as Batman. I think that's one thing that Justice League struggled with, is how to make Batman appear as powerful in a movie like that when he has Superman and Wonder Woman and the Flash, Aquaman with him. And I think they did a good job. So I think James Gunn can do it too. But I think there is something to be said for those grittier, grounded films.
More character driven, more story driven, rather than just spectacle and effects driven. And that's why I love them.
Exactly. That wraps up our movie news. We'll move on to the TV news, and we got a full list of everything coming to DC TV this year. So what were your thoughts on what we're getting this year on the small screen?
Well, the fact that we know we're getting Creature Commandos this year. I mean, how long have we been talking about that? Because that's step one. I mean, that's what James Gunn said was step one. I've gone on the record several times on this very show saying how much I love those characters, how I grew up with those characters in the comic books, how I picked up the latest 2023 updated trade of their adventures. And like you said a few minutes ago, this is vintage James Gunn getting characters that are quirky, different, scary, spooky, not your normal superhero fare, and bringing them into the spotlight. It's something that's going to get people reading comics. I mean, that's the first signing. Everything else that's coming is just a cherry on the cake. I mean, we're getting more Superman and Lois, brilliant, but just the bittersweet news that it's the final season as well hurts a little bit. But to see Bitsy Tulloch, Elizabeth Tulloch on set with her on-screen sons, with Tyler Hoechlin, who to me has quickly become one of the greatest Superman actors of all time, just does my heart good. And I'm praying and hoping that once the DC proper is up there and James Gunn has managed to do that, we get another Crisis-like event and we get to see Tyler again and better rendered versions of Christopher Reeve and George Reeves and all the other great men who have made the Man of Steel such a presence over the last 86 years. But who knows? I mean, like you said, we're not going to get a lot of movies, but if we're getting at least 2 TV series that are going to cover for most of the year. I mean, it's only 10 episodes for Superman and Lois. We don't know how long Creature Commandos is going to run, but you know, with Penguin as well, we might get a year's worth of TV entertainment. And if that's the case, yeah, bring it on. I mean, after the Batman, Colin Farrell can do no wrong in my book. The fact that Adam came out of the cinema not even knowing that was Colin Farrell, and I blew his mind when I told him, what can I say? Yeah, it's an exciting year ahead, I think, for DC TV. What's your take?
I think, yeah, I think it is going to be interesting and exciting, and not mainstream in a way. All these things we're getting, except for Superman and Lois, are kind of characters that might make people scratch their heads. A Penguin series, you know, that's. But again, Colin Farrell was so good. I think it's going to be incredible. Kite Man, hell yeah! I mean, would we ever think that when we were young reading comics that we'd ever get a Kite Man animated?
Anything
series?
Harley Quinn related, we're all on board, aren't we?
No. So, I mean, that's interesting, but it's not something that people are going to recognize right away, and I find that intriguing. Superman and Lois. It is a shame that it's the last season, but I am so, but I'm almost happy because I was so surprised that we got it. I think we were very lucky to get it because we were really ready to wrap up the CW, but we got a whole 10 more episodes, and we're going to get to see more of Lex, and that was such a cool introduction last season. So I'm just happy we're getting more. It would be nice to see
Absolutely.
them do. I mean, they did a lot with the Flash, trying to tie loose ends, but just to bring some of those characters back in some way would be, or the CW characters back in some way would be cool. So we'll see what happens with that. And yeah, hopefully, fingers crossed, we're going to get the 5th season of Harley Quinn, or at least a lot of footage. That would be great. And of course, the real thing that we're all waiting for, and also another thing that people aren't going to recognize right off the bat, is Creature Commandos. The introduction of what James Gunn's DC universe is going to be like. That is going to be, I think that is going to be my number one most anticipated bit of entertainment, no matter what medium you're talking about, all year. So I'm super psyched about that. And we talked about the pictures that, blanking on her name again, but Lois Lane released from the set of
Elizabeth Tulloch.
Yes, yeah, released from the set of Superman and Lois. It's just great to see them all back, and it's really nice in a TV show, and it goes a long way when the cast seems to really vibe and get along. I think that's what made Firefly so great, and a lot of Joss Whedon shows, I think the casts were really, really close, and and I kind of get that with this cast, that they're all really close, and it's nice to see them back. Like I said, they hit the ground running too after the strikes were over. It's good to see. But it's going to be an interesting year for superheroes on film and on the small screen for sure. And that wraps up the TV news. But we have a comic story that's very interesting. Scott Snyder is returning to DC, launching what may be DC's version of their Ultimate Universe. So, what was your take on this?
Now, this is a story that could probably have me talking all day. We've interviewed Scott on this show, and I've interviewed him one-on-one as well. And one of the things he said to me in confidence was that he did have more plans to come back to DC. He did have another big Batman story and an event that he had planned for DC. He couldn't say too much, but he did say Earth 1 was something that he loved, and that could be the basis for a future separate Elseworlds, maybe DC universe, that could be translated into comic form into more than just 4 or 5 mini-series collected into graphic novels. And that was that, because that was just over a year ago that I spoke to Scott. And then we get this press release from DC saying the new book's coming out, plus a major event for 2024 and the return of Scott Snyder. Now, when you add that to Scott's very mysterious tweet, and then the fact that some sites are saying it could be a DC's version of the Ultimate Universe, that just makes me think, okay, so Earth One was kind of that anyway. It was fallible, realistic, much more human characters, even people like Superman and Wonder Woman, and how their antics would be in a real world like the one we live in. And Batman Earth One is one of my all-time favorites, not just because of Gary Frank and Brad Anderson's stellar artwork, but because of the script and seeing a Batman falling into trash cans and Alfred with a walking stick because the SAS life almost wrecked his body. If that's the kind of thing they're planning to do, but with an actual universe and ongoing titles, running concurrently, of course, with the main DCU, so I don't want another one of these 5G nonsenses that Dan Didio was touting to replace the DC universe with the 5G universe permanently. That I'm not happy with, because the legacy characters have been around for 80 years for a reason. They need to continue. But to have a separate, more grounded, earthy DC universe, where do I sign? I'm absolutely all in. And with a talent like Scott Snyder behind it, because what I love about Scott is, while he's primarily more of a dark fantasy horror writer, he knows people. He can write dialogue with the best of them. I don't know if you've read a series of his called Dark Spaces Wildfire, about 5 female convicts that are firefighters. It's one of the best miniseries I have ever read. He just writes people that speak like people, that act like people, that emote like people. And if that's the kind of DC we're going to get, but with the characters we know and love, take my money, DC. I'm all in. I mean, you must have thoughts about this.
Yeah, I would love to see his pitch. I hope that when this is all settled and they release a hardcover collection, they put in the pitch, because I think for them to do this, I think his pitch must have been crazy good. So I've been really curious to see that. The one thing about the Marvel Universe is it needed an Ultimate Universe, because they have never hit reset on their continuity ever, and it got really convoluted and really a mess.
Well, they had the first Heroes Reborn with Liefeld and Jim Lee in that, and that was so bad.
Yeah, but DC has never been one to shy away from just hitting that button. And it's, I always say that I'm glad they do it. Maybe they do it a little too often, but I'm glad that they do it. But so I kind of approached this story. It was like, is that needed? But I like the idea of a more real world approach. But then I wonder, it's like Zack Snyder said, Marvel might be the world outside your window, but DC, these characters are gods. And I'm curious how that's going to work in a more I don't want to say real world, but more real. I guess we'll say that. But if anybody can do it, it's Scott Snyder. I'm glad to have him back. I'm glad he got his. Because when we interviewed him, he said, "Yeah, I need to step away and do my own books for a while, step away from superheroes." I'm glad he was able to do that. And welcome back to the fold. We need you. Everybody loved metal and death metal, and everybody loved it. So I think that fans are going to love it. I think this is going to sell out. I think you might better get to the comic shop that Wednesday early, because this is not going to stick around in stores. I am curious too how he's going to put it into some kind of an event, because Ultimate was just kind of launched. How are they going to tie that in with the broader DC universe is interesting. But now we're in the era of the omniverse with DC, so you can do anything, and it's all as important as everything else. It's just because this is in a separate universe than the regular DC doesn't make it any less important with the broader DC brand, I guess. So I'm looking forward to this. And one thing you brought up also that I liked is that he saw it as something that's more than just a few miniseries and then done. It's something that you can have a continuing series.
Exactly.
And that is something that DC really hasn't done. You know, with the Elseworlds, it's all been miniseries or miniseries and a sequel miniseries, things like that. So that idea, I really like. It's just, you know, we always say it's a great time to be a DC fan because one of the main reasons is because their comics are so good, and this is just going to add to it. Yeah, so I'm really looking forward to how this plays out. Looking forward to more news as it gets released. So yeah, for sure.
I mean, Scott's just such a lovely guy, and as hit and miss as the New 52 was, no one can argue that his work on Batman was stellar throughout. His Justice League was incredible, introducing characters like Jarro.
Did he? He wrote Black Glove, right? The Batman.
No, that was Grant Morrison.
Oh, okay.
Scott Snyder did Court of Owls.
Yeah. Okay.
And
that. Okay. Not
Death
Black
of the
Glove.
Family.
Oh no. Shoot, it was like a series that came out right before they relaunched
Black Mirror.
Black Mirror, yes. That was what turned me on to the Scott Snyder.
That's what gave. See, that was for Detective Comics when Dick Grayson was still Batman, but that story was so stellar that DC said, "Listen, let's give him the main Batman book when we reboot." Right. And then Scott was really really scared to take on the main Batman book, but he smashed it. I mean, Scott Snyder is one of those writers where I will literally pick up anything with his name on it. If you can read Dark Spaces Wildfire, it's a 5-issue miniseries, which is going to be pretty hard to get right now, but it's been collected in graphic novel. Fantastic. It's brilliant. So his ideas, the way he loves these characters, yeah, I'm psyched. I'm really excited.
And look at how, what an impact Court of Owls has had. It's gotten into TV shows and video games, I believe, at this point. So it really goes to show the power of what he can create. So yeah, it should be very, very interesting. And keep an eye on the story. I'm sure we have a lot more to say about this.
Well, it's got my name written all over it, so bring it on, Mr. Snyder. Bring it on. Yeah. And if you can bring Greg Capullo back with you, even more so.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And now we are going to our other news, where we got some more info from great Sideshow Collectibles.
Oh, I love them.
First up is a Dark Side for Superman statue. What did you think of this statue?
Wasn't it Doomsday?
Yeah, it was the Doomsday.
You said Dark Side, sorry.
Oh, sorry, Jackson. Oh, I'm sorry. My bad. Yeah,
I got very confused then. Don't worry, we've both our brains have reached apocalypse several times in the last space of the last 12 months. Yeah, I mean, this thing's gorgeous. I mean, last year was the anniversary of the classic Death of Superman saga, which is still the biggest selling graphic novel trade paperback in history. And rightly so. I mean, that battle, the way that whole series was structured from when Doomsday broke out, where every chapter leading up to Superman's death, each issue had fewer and fewer panels. So it was like 6 panels a page, 5 panels a page, 4 panels a page, 3 panels a page, 2 panels a page. And the final issue was just made up of splash pages, ending with that ultimate battle and the death of both the hero and the villain. This Sideshow statue, we said it last week, I think. How do they do it? The way they can capture the actual likenesses of actors in their TV and movie statues, but the experience, the atmosphere, the fear, the terror of the comic book with this piece, and yet it still looked like Dan Jurgens artwork, John Bogdanove artwork, Tom Grummett artwork, all the artists who drew the original saga. It's all there. And fans of those comics, I mean, who isn't, who look at this piece will think, this is gorgeous. But isn't everything Sideshow gorgeous? Again, I need a lottery win because I would be proud to own these, but Sadly, my budget does not allow. I have to stick to the flimsies and the trade paperbacks. But this is a beautiful piece of work. I mean, what did you make of it?
Yeah, it is incredible. Last week we talked about how incredible the statues are. It looked like a photograph from the movie. The sculpted Ben Affleck looked like Ben Affleck. This looked like something right off the comic page. And there's a lot of talk about how some of these superhero costumes, they just wouldn't translate into a live action setting in a movie. So you have to change it, and I get that. But what's great about these statues is they capture that kinetic energy of the comic page, and they look like they're right from the comic page, but they don't look cheesy. It looks as good as it did on the page. And bravo to Sideshow to be able to capture both that real live action photography look on the statues, and also this great comic book look of the statues with the motion of Doomsday's like ponytail thing, like blowing in. I mean, those little, this sculpting is incredible. I don't know how they do it.
It looks like it's moving, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yep. It's incredible. I don't know how they do that. I don't collect statues, but I love living vicariously and seeing what's out there and looking at the details. It's just wild. And they have another statue coming out of Poison Ivy from the Arkham games, which I just love. What was your take on this statue?
Again, you hit the nail on the head. The way they can blend and marry photorealism with something that's complete fantasy and add that comic book magic to it. I mean, they're sculptors and painters. Let's be fair here, they're geniuses. They're absolute geniuses. I mean, we can say most of them have worked on movies and TV shows and have artwork in galleries and statues all over the world. But clearly they're also fans, because what I get from Sideshow is you have had other companies in the past produce pieces, and some have been good, some have been great, some have been awful. But every single thing Sideshow Collectibles releases via Hot Toys or any of the other companies they work with, everything McFarlane Toys releases is next level, because you can feel an understanding of the characters and the love from the characters in every single item they release. This Poison Ivy, the vines, the leaves, you feel like you can touch them. You feel like that if you did, you'd be poisoned. Her eyes, the look on her face, the way she's alluring and yet terrifying. It's just brilliant. Like you said, I don't know how they do it. And when you add to the fact that many of them are hand painted, there are so few, they're really valuable and collectible if you get one. It just blows my mind the way they can produce this. And like you said, we can't afford them, but getting these press releases from these companies, seeing their work, and then getting these lovely art books that Insight Editions produce of the Sideshow's DC work and of the Sideshow statues, and they blow them up and you can zoom in on them and you can see the level of love and artistry that's gone into them. It's fantastic. And Poison Ivy needs a serious representation on screen. We got close with Gotham. Lake Bell is amazing on Harley, but we need a terrifying yet alluring Poison Ivy on the big screen one day. And maybe, as James Gunn is very good at doing these lesser known characters well, we might see her. But until then, thank you, Sideshow, for producing a stunning Poison Ivy statue. I mean, what was your take on this? I mean, when it comes to looks and costumes and how things are designed, you are the man.
One thing that I've talked about how I love the Arkham games, and they're some of my favorite video games of all time. And one of the reasons is because of the design of the characters that they used. That I still think the Scarecrow they used in the game was the best Scarecrow design ever.
No doubt.
I would love to see a Scarecrow statue like this. But Poison Ivy was a great design too, and they nailed it. I mentioned how the one statue looked like a photograph, the one looked like right from the comic panel. This looks right from the video game. The little details like the little TVs and stuff right from the game itself. The stuff that was in her weeds and everything. I mean, it's just unbelievable. We talk about how expensive these statues are, but the work that goes into them makes it worth it. I mean, you see, I mean, just the detail is just incredible. That can't be easy to do, and they make a lot of statues a year, all things considered. So I don't know how they do that, but this it's an amazing statue, absolutely. And that wraps up all of our news for this episode. Steve, is there anything DC that you're reading or watching that you wanna mention?
Just received the final chapter of Joker Year One. Wow. I knew Chip Zdarsky was serious after his miniseries Batman the Knight. Now he's managed to tie in events from that series into this. He's managed to clear up discrepancies and differences between the Batman history of the one Scott Snyder story I didn't love, 0 Year, and the ultimate Batman origin story, Year One, and 3 Jokers, succinctly, smartly, in a way that's entertaining and that contains mind-blowing action and psychology.
Right.
Have you read any of Joker Year One?
Not yet. Not yet. I want to read the whole story in one sitting. So
it's 3 issues. I don't know if Josh has them all in box. If he doesn't, let me know. Because it's superb. Obviously, Batman's my go-to guy. Ram V's entered the final phase of his Detective Comics operatic saga with some of the finest noir horror artwork I've seen in comics since the days of Bisset and Totleben and Bernie Wrightson. It's been a love it, hate it kind of run. My assistant editor who's reviewing the book has been more in the doesn't quite get it margin, but understands the artistry and work that's gone behind it. I've loved every second. Like we say, DC in comic books are on a roll. What else? Tom King's Wonder Woman. All 5 issues sold out, gone back to more print runs. Just received issue 6, haven't read that yet, which is the end of the first story arc. Josh Williamson's Superman, all out classic action. And I'm not going to talk more about Tom Taylor because if that guy's head gets any bigger, they're going to need like a crane to hold it up. And I tell him I love him with every comic I read, so I'm not going to go down that route. But I mean, I will only talk about the things I love and not about Tim Sheridan's Alan Scott.
Oh yeah, I wanted to.
Wow.
Yeah.
Why in God's name is that only a 6-issue miniseries? DC, let this guy loose. He's brilliant. More Alan Scott. Wesley Dodds the Sandman, fantastic. Jay Garrick Flash, fantastic. Really, really happy. I mean, what are you reading and loving?
I just recently read some kind of older stuff. Dan Abnett's Legion series from 2000. It's kind of fun. Just read that.
So good.
Yeah. And the first 2 volumes of the Teen Titans series from, I believe it was 2017, where they go to New York and Superboy returns. So that's been fun. I wanted to ask you actually, because I just one thing I haven't read yet either. Did you what did you think of the new Constantine series?
I'm biased because Simon Spurrier did, I believe it was 12 issues when the whole Sandman Universe line launched, and they've been collected into 2 trade paperbacks. For me, it's the best Hellblazer has been since the original runs by Jamie Delano and Garth Ennis. It's fantastic. However, you can start the new series completely fresh. You won't be lost because there's a lovely little recap at the beginning. But Cy Spurrier is not just a great guy. He's a fantastic writer. Pick up his first 2 trades first. And I mean, I'm reading them when they come out. But I think I'm going to get the trades for these as well because I wanted them on my shelf lined up. They just look nicer. but brilliant. Really, really good. If you're a Constantine fan, prepare to have your mind blown. Oh, I can't give too much away because you haven't read it. Let's just say, as the series begins, he's seen better days. He's coming back a little bit worse for wear. That's about as much as I can give away, because the end of the last series Spurrier wrote, it was almost like, is there even a way back? But because he's such a brilliant writer, he probably had this planned from day one.
Yeah, I need to reread that.
Definitely recommended.
Yeah. Okay.
Definitely.
Great. All right. And with that, wraps up another episode of the DC Comics News podcast. Steve, where can people find you? Online and in the world?
All over the multiverse, Brad. You know me. I will invade, and red skies will follow. Type Steve J. Ray Fantastic Universes or Steve J. Ray's Fantastic Universes into Google. You'll see my work on DC Comics News, Dark Knight News, and Fantastic Universes. Listen to me on this wonderful show with Brother Brad and some of the other gang when we can get hold of them, because they too are fighting criminals and evil maniacal geniuses throughout the multiverse on a daily basis, and sometimes they need a break. Other than that, I've got Fantastic Universe are about to launch their YouTube channel, and in partnership with Comics in Motion, we're launching our new show, Detective Comments, which is a look back at Batman over the last 10 decades, 85 years, and every aspect of his character, the Bat family, the Bat Rogues Gallery, and the topic will be set each week by either myself or my co-host, Dark Knight News assistant editor James Attias, or our guests. And you, sir, need to be a guest, because I want to hear your hot take on Batman and what you want to talk about him or his extended family. So that's where you'll find me on X. Lol. Find me at elstevo, EL_STEEVO. What about yourself, Brother Brad?
Yeah, you can find me running news reviews, DC Comics News, and the occasional review for Mark with the Movie Blog. Find me on this podcast, of course, and I say it every week, but when we get back to the Harley Quinn Mad Love podcast, you can find me on that podcast as well. And I don't really ever post. I have my own issues with the site, but you can follow me on X or whatever it's called these days, Flicky B. And as far as DC Comics News, you can find us all over all your socials at DC Comics News. So check us out. And with that, we'll say goodbye until the next episode. And we like to say something that everybody should be doing, and that is to
read
more
comics.